All right. So, how is how is MoveNat class going?
Oh man, we're just diving in off the deep end. MoveNat class. Well, we actually had a discussion the other day about what we wanted to call it going forward because MoveNat is a term. It's trademark of the organization Erwan Lacour started, and our group has gone under many names. Originally, we just called it MoveNat. Then we called it Primal Movement. Then we called it East Bay Natural Movers. Then we coined this term, the Natural Outdoor Workout. And I could keep coming back to just natural movement. But we've coalesced as this, tribe of sort of misfits and oddballs who are all united in. I don't know what the unifying theme is, except for maybe there was this element during COVID, at least, of resisting the lockdowns. We kept working out outside, meeting up, not sheltering in place, not what was the term for social distancing? Yeah,
Yeah,
we
6 feet apart, slowing the spread.
2 weeks to slow the curve, stop the spread, whatever,
Flatten. Yeah.
flatten the thing. But yeah, no, it's good. It's going strong. The marker of the strength is that even if I don't show up for several weeks, I come back and there are new people who have been integrated into the group, and it just kind of works on its own at this point. There's no real central leadership.
That is like I think a huge like bridge to for a group to be self-sustaining. You need that like second person. If it lives and dies based on whether you're there, then it's gonna die. I mean, I don't know. I guess that's true on various scales and stuff, but like that's a huge step to be able to like miss it for a couple weeks and have it still being, you know.
Yeah, it's like an ecosystem. It's more robust because of the diversity of species in the group.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of, I always talk about that video, the viral video of the guy that he's dancing by himself at the park, and then someone else comes up and starts dancing alongside him. And suddenly it's not just a random dude dancing by himself, it's like a whole sparks the movement. And before long, everybody at the entire park just starts dancing, even though I don't think there's any music playing. And I think the analogy is with natural movement, you kind of look a little bit silly if you just go to the park and are crawling around on all fours. But as soon as you have two people, then it's like, okay, they're doing something. It's not just like a schizophrenic Berkeley person marching to the beat of their own drum.
Yeah, in Fight Club, he has to have multiple personalities to sort of get it started with two, to get a second person. He just managed to be both people. But I digress.
Have you ever heard of this new phenomenon of did talkers?
Oh,
Dissociative identity disorder.
okay,
It's like people with split personalities. And with TikTok, the function of the app is like these, videos where you can kind of stop, start. And so it's very conducive to like a performative version of what is debatable as to whether it's like a real disorder or if it's people just like getting their kicks and finding a way to get attention or whatever. Like I assume that most people with dissociative identity disorder, like if you were to put a gun to their head, they would cut the act. It's not like it's not so incontrollable. Although I wonder, there are things like Tourette's syndrome where it's like a chromosomal disorder. It's a real thing,
sure.
and that causes the verbal tics. Again, I think people might have some amount of control, but it might be very painful for them to suppress it. And anyway, I was reading this article about these kids who are part of the did talk movement, and they all kind of reinforce each other. And it's like, oh yeah, that's of course that's one of your personalities. Uh,
I want to come back to the disorders and TikTok, but first, just to circle back to the MoveNat, is it right to call it a class? Do you or is that would you say it's not really
yeah,
to what extent is it educational? I guess.
good question. If you show up and you're willing to try new things, like you'll learn to inhabit your body in a new way. It's non coercive in the sense that, a lot of classes you show up and the teacher tells you like now do this, now do that. With the natural movement group, there's a little more leeway. People are doing something that you're not into, you can just kind of walk to a different part of the park and someone else might be doing something different that looks more interesting. I've tried to put a little bit more structure on it because I do think that there's an important pedagogy around movement technique, and I learned efficient movement techniques through the MoveNat organization. Everything from barefoot running to swimming with a minimum of energy expenditure for how far you can go and so they're like in any kind of movement that you consider, whether it's jumping, crawling, climbing, throwing, there are biomechanical principles to keep in mind, and we practice those, we train those. So in that sense, it is a class, but there's also this free flow component, the social component, and I don't usually feel that comfortable telling people what to do for more than say 15 or 20 minutes, after which chances are I want to go off and do my own thing.
I know. I mean, I remember attending once where there was like a circle and everybody got to invent one thing, or it was like each person
Yeah,
bring one new
the
thing to
movement
the.
carousel.
Is that was that what that was?
Yeah, that's not my favorite game to be honest. And I think it strikes at this problem of when everyone is simultaneously teacher and student. Sometimes you might compromise movement quality because you're all imitating like something that's kind of a dysfunctional movement pattern. And I usually don't call people out. Sometimes I might with my co-organizer who actually started the group. He came before me, um, but he does a lot of things that he finds them to be like restorative and good mobility exercises. But I look at it and I'm like, actually, that's a movement pattern that if you train your body to go into that position, you're setting yourself up for different injuries if you're doing the kinds of movements like forward locomotion, especially when it gets into like really intense, like powerful forward locomotion. If you're a running back or something, you can't be moving in certain ways that will lead your body to be more likely to kind of break under the amount of stress you're putting it under. So like there's this whole school of thought led by these guys in New Orleans that they call themselves or they call their modality Goda. Have you heard of Goda?
No.
Okay, so the greatest of all time athletes
Okay.
or actions. It's another one of these clunky names, kind of like, well, some people like MoveNet. Goda is distinct and it's become a brand, a controversial brand because they claim to have all the answers. It's all about you never let your inside ankle bone go low. And I mean, I could kind of, act it out, but look up Goda and you'll see where they analyze slow motion video of the best athletes, the Michael Jordans, the Deion Sanders, that these guys that uh, had long careers, didn't get injured, and they say that it's because of these innate principles that they figured out and have reverse engineered into a system of Goda, where all of the movements that people come to their training camp train in are trying to recode the body to follow these patterns. Uh, you could kind of make an analogy to someone like the knees over toes guy, Ben Patrick, who's another big like Instagram famous uh, influencer, and he's not talking so much about movement patterns as like bulletproofing the knees, the hips, the ankles through these like carefully targeted exercises, things like calf raises and uh, backwards sleds, where you're strengthening all the muscles that are used, like when you land and there's suddenly a lot of downward force on your knees. The conventional wisdom was always don't let your knees go over your toes. Did you hear that in sports growing up?
I mean, like when bending down to touch my
No,
toes.
more like in basketball. Let's say you're getting a rebound and then you come down. Like they say, you don't want to land in a way that would put your knees like bending and to go past the
Hmm.
front of your toes,
Okay.
because that's where people get ACL injuries and all this stuff. But he's saying if you train the muscles enough, not only can you be less susceptible to injury, but he can dunk and like he's a pretty tall guy, but he's not super tall, and like yeah, he just has no problem like doing these incredible dunks, and he kind of promises this to the people who follow his program, the knees over toes program. And I like it. I like the knees over toes program. I do some of his stuff. I do some of the go to stuff. I say, no one has a monopoly on movement, so you can borrow from all of them, and take what you like and leave what you don't.
When did you get to the point where you were like invested enough that you had like, I'm like, I don't want to just show up for a class. Like I want to have a class. You know what I mean? Like where you had something. I know I have something to say about this kind
After I did the MoveNet certifications, I had a little more
of. Okay.
confidence, and the group grew so slowly. In the early years, it was just me and Chip, my co-founder, going to the park, and people would kind of rotate in and out. But most people didn't stick around for that long. Even back then, I would kind of lead stuff if Chip wasn't there, and we had certain go-to things. But it was always the spirit of like playful, spontaneous movement. So we might do like a little parkour obstacle course where we just run through Berkeley's campus and find stuff to interact with. But after going through the certifications, I realized, yeah, like there is a pedagogy, and you can break these movements down into their constituent parts, and kind of train the individual sections, and then chain those together into these progressions, where you're capable of doing things that you wouldn't have had the confidence to do if you didn't train the smaller parts first. So a good example of that would be like a really like a long broad jump or something like that, where there's an arm swing involved, both to get the momentum for the swing, for the jump, and then a second one to dissipate the impact on the landing. And you can break that down. I've picked up some kind of mnemonic devices for that, that you know people can improve in one session in like 15-20 minutes. You can add 2-3 feet to your broad jump, just learning this one technique. So it's been a progression, and I still don't always feel, like I said, I'm not always in my element as the teacher. Sometimes I would rather just be a co-participant, but I also feel some sense of obligation to step it up a little bit, and especially for newcomers, like give them something concrete to take away. Not only that they got a good workout, got their heart rate up, but also that they have a new skill.
So so if we just back way up, kind of sort of, but I mean, I ask about that course or that meetup group slash, but there's but class also, and there's certification. There's like knowledge, and you talked about various people who put out knowledge online, and and I know you're involved in publishing, and so these people are publishing themselves in various ways. But I mean, I'm interested in that as a type of education, but I'm also interested in traditional education. So let me just go back and ask you, like, what do you think about the school system? Like, what do you think about traditional education? Did you like school? What were you like as a student, or what's your take on that?
I went to school in Marin County public schools, so it was a more affluent area. Good teachers, good. There weren't a lot of distractions in terms of like yeah. I mean, I think most kids were genuinely there to learn, and myself included. And there was the social component. I met all my friends in school pretty much, and I liked my friends, and we hung out after school, near the school. So it was kind of this, for me, really like a pretty idyllic uh, situation. This was, growing up in the '90s, also, before all the craziness of the that we've had recently, where everything gets politicized. Pretty insulated from that, all the way up until high school, that became more politically aware. Um, of course, looking back, I can point to deficiencies, and like PE would be a perfect example where like they didn't really teach movement. They didn't teach real. We had a class called motor skills growing up, but still, it was what I remember was just playing games. And the sports-based PE programs, I think, are pretty common, and it's a symptom of kind of, I think, laziness, but also, yeah, like how do you coordinate the movement of a class of 30 kids? You can do drills, which now people equate with Hitler Youth, and so that's not okay. You can't do that anymore. Or you can just kind of get them playing games, and so of course you're gonna go for the easier thing that requires less coordination on your part. In terms of the school system in general, my views have been most influenced by the late uh, Catholic. Well, he was a defrocked Catholic priest, but he was a Catholic priest, and his name was Ivan Illich. He wrote a book called Deschooling Society, and a whole series of books with a similar theme about how modern institutions accomplish the opposite of their intended goals. So, transportation gets us there slower, and when you consider the fact that you used to maybe walk to the market, now you have to drive across town, or freeways create these unwalkable cities that it's not even possible to get from point A to point B on foot anymore. So healthcare makes us sicker. We have this whole category of medicine that is of questionable value, and people just spend money on it because they have money and there's someone selling a cure. Same thing with schools. Schools make us stupider. How do they do that? Well, they kind of take away some of our intuitive faculties, maybe rob us of our curiosity. And I was one of the kids that was relatively good at the game of school. I could solve the problems and like figure out how to answer the test questions and how to study for the test. Uh, but I have some friends that slipped through the cracks and ended up in a kind of a bad place after high school because there was no career trajectory laid out for them. And so, I think if our system both allowed for greater exploration of like the practical trades, and got kids to find their curiosity a little bit earlier on. I think this is how it's done in Germany to some extent. Like you get on a certain track depending on your aptitude. I don't think that they have it totally figured out, but I don't know. There's all kinds of approaches: Montessori, Waldorf. I'm not an expert in those, but my kids, one of them is 3, so she's almost of school age, and we'll have to figure out what are we going to do. We're certainly not going to send them into the dysfunctional public schools where they're you know injecting all kinds of ideology into the curriculum at a inappropriately young age.
Right. Yeah. No. Although I wonder sometimes. I mean, I do sometimes wonder. Like because it's hard not to get pulled into that uh, quagmire or debate of yeah that politicization. But I do want to thank you belated. I think a year ago you recommended to me that Deschooling Society, and that is that's a really well written book.
You
He's
probably know it
very
better than I
thoughtful,
do. I can't remember
thoughtful guy.
how much of it I've actually read versus reading distilled versions of it by other people. And you're talking about the online instruction in the context of movement, but also it seems to me like we're heading towards a world where we can uh, decouple the learning aspect of schools from the social aspect. And I do think it's important to get, that's where I met all my friends. So do I want as long as my daughter has a place to go and interact with other kids her age, I'm not too worried about us being able to find the materials to, my wife, can homeschool, can like present the material. And, why wouldn't you use the best teachers through an online course? Khan Academy. I'm sure there's even better knockoffs of Khan Academy at this point in the different subspecialties where it's like, and higher education too. Like, why not have the best lecturer be the person who delivers the material to you in lecture form, and then you get help from a tutor or something like that.
Yeah, I mean that's a legitimate model now that you know some of those lectures are available for teachers. Like, and I've heard people talk about yeah that uh, being able to use that. I think and it's interesting because those people, a lot of the people that maybe are the most famous lecturers have put their stuff online for free. Like there's some like math linear algebra professor at MIT who he's millions of people has watched his lectures because in the early 2000s he put a bunch of them online, and then all of a sudden like he didn't expect it or he didn't monetize it, I don't think, but so that's
Wow, what a missed opportunity.
right. Yeah, exactly. Uh,
No, but I would love to actually produce some content around movement. What I've synthesized from all these different places, I've kind of come up with my own modality of sorts, and I don't have a name for it. It borrows from a lot of different places. The chief among those are MoveNat, and then the precursor to that, which was Georges Hebert's natural method, and sometimes it's called Hebertism, but it emphasizes uh, full spectrum of natural human movements performed with efficient technique outdoors in the elements, exposed to sunlight and wind and water and all these elements that are kind of crucial for like uh, hardening us a little bit against the the stresses of the outdoors, because those stresses at the right dose are pretty essential for health. You don't want to overdo it. You don't want to get hypothermia. You don't want to get sunburn, but you do need in smaller doses all of these things, and that's the matrix of stress that we evolved in. But the movement technique itself, I kind of struggle with a bit of like one, just setting up the camera. I'd rather be in the moment. I'd rather be in the flow. So I feel like I need to just dedicate like a day at some point where I've got my full list of all my kind of trademark movements and progressions, and just go through them one by one and say like this is how you do it broken down, and find a way to arrange it in a sequence that you can progress from the simple, get the fundamental techniques down, and then move on to the more advanced progressions.
well, I mean, I think that's kind of like sounds very similar to like writing a book, where you like uh, writing is a pain in the ass, but at the same time, like you decide, okay, I got to clear my schedule or clear 3 hours a day for a couple months or something like that, and then I mean, what was that? Can you talk a little bit about your book? The process of writing that, how how you decided you were going to write it, and what it was like put that effort in and seeing in the product at the end.
Yeah, I wrote this book, Hormetics, subtitle Physical Fitness for Free People, during the COVID lockdowns, and it was just before my daughter was born, maybe kind of overlapping with the period after she was born, and so I was kind of like in sprint mode to take all of my previous writings on this one theme of beneficial stress and try to make a cohesive narrative out of it. And as soon as I realized that everything I'd been writing about for the previous 6 months to a year dealt with this same theme, it was like, well, the structure of the book is pretty obvious. And so the outline, like, practically wrote itself. And then I just had to sort of populate it with a lot of the material that I'd already written, iron out the transitions, and try to make it as actionable for people coming in from at any level of fitness. Uh, and yeah, I think I wrote that book largely for myself, and I got some very positive feedback from a handful of readers who recommended it widely, and that was heartening. Like I didn't expect it to be a wild bestseller, and it wasn't at all. You know, probably sold maybe, yeah, I don't know, maybe 250, 300 copies, something like that. So not it's not a basement dweller. It's not one of these books that didn't sell any copies, but um, I think that in some sense, like these ideas have already been among a certain like esoteric fringe health group. These ideas are well known, and then among a mainstream audience, they're like still a little too fringe. And I feel like I need to rewrite the book in some ways, incorporating some new insights I've come across since 2020, uh, including like I've revised my position on sugar, and I think that there's a good argument to be made that we want to uh, limit a lot of stress, like, well, let's say, even something like fasting. Um, I've had to kind of reappraise my take on fasting. I don't think that fasting is something that people should do every day. It has benefits if it's done in kind of an acute setting, but basically the big difference between beneficial stress and harmful stress, one is the dose, and two is the whether it's chronic or acute. And acute stress, like the body can kind of get a beneficial adaptation out of that, but if it's chronic, then you're just being ground down. And I recently had an experience of like a period of chronic stress, 3 or 4 weeks, that really like took it out of me, and so that is another reason I'd like to kind of revise it, just to make it a little bit less like gung ho. Gotta add more stress to your life, because I don't think that's adding more stress for most people is not the answer. It's about uh, kind of introducing very small amounts in the right ways to make you more resilient to the inevitable stress that we can't avoid, and the potential stress from a cataclysmic type event that we hope to avoid, but there's no guarantee.
Wait, connect. Where did stress and sugar connect again?
Well, I've been, mostly low carb, high fat for a long time, following the kind of primal paleo diet, and it's become conventional wisdom at this point that sugar is bad for you. But there's another school of thought which is mostly right now associated with the name Ray Peat, who is recently passed away. He was in his mid 80s, so nothing to indict his dietary recommendations. But he was a researcher originally in like fertility and hormones, because he found that was the one area of science that hadn't been like really politicized at that point when he was in college. I don't know, back in the 60s or 50s or something.
Mm-hmm.
And so he looked at how hormones impact our metabolism and different stresses, and he found that like eating sugar by itself, table sugar, honey, fructose, but fruit contains both fructose and sucrose. Like table sugar is just sucrose. I don't actually, don't quote me on that, but he says sugar will upregulate your metabolism. It'll kind of speed up the thyroid, and allow your body to handle more stress. It'll
Oh,
downregulate things like cortisol. And it's true that like, and this, most people can probably relate to this experience of like um, being fasted and uh, being grouchy or whatever, and that's
oh yeah.
one sign of the stress. But if you're fat adapted, if your body is used to getting into that fat burning mode where it's using its own body fat, then it's going to be less stressful. But there's still, and I think that Ray Peat is kind of missing this whole component of hormesis in his framework. But his whole thing is really like avoid stress, um, and eat sugar, eat ice cream. These are good foods.
Mm-hmm. Um, so avoid the eat. Okay, so eat a little sugar.
And fat, and fat.
And because ice cream definitely has fat in it. Yeah, yeah.
Saturated fat in particular being the good guy, because it's a more stable molecule, doesn't oxidize as easily.
I got distracted by this, so not really on the topic, but it's just on my mind, so I'll just go ahead and ask it. Where is cholesterol? Is high cholesterol okay then now, or like I just got a cholesterol test where I was out of the norm. I think I was like
Yeah,
have
I
high
think you're probably
cholesterol.
fine. Do your own research, come
Yeah,
to
yeah,
your own conclusions.
yeah, yeah.
Read Gary Taubes, Nina Teicholz, read Ray Peat. And then just for fun, go ahead and read Michael Greger, who's a big vegan, low fat proponent. You could add, well, what's his name? He wrote this book called The Starch Solution. Um, I'm blanking, but yeah, like read both sides, see what resonates and try to synthesize your own conclusion. And that's another thing about Ray Peat is he wouldn't tell people like you should do this. He would say, "Have you tried this?" And I would say like as a first approximation, if you feel good, um, I wouldn't worry too much about the cholesterol. The one thing I do warn people against is combining sugar and fat like all the time. So I've done something called natural hormone enhancement, and the main component of this is a cyclical eating pattern where you eat mostly high fat, low carb, and then every 3 or 4 days you have a meal that's high fat. I'm sorry, high carb, low fat, and it gives you kind of the best of both worlds where uh, the high fat low carb keeps you in a state of low insulin production, so your body's not storing as much fat that you're consuming, and puts you in that like fat burning mode. But then you also get some of the anabolic benefits of eating carbs from time to time. You're replenishing your muscle glycogen and giving yourself some fuel to power your more intense workouts.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a way like without taking steroids to kind of get the lean but strong bodybuilder physique. Not saying that I've accomplished that, but it's a work in progress.
Do you think that the motivation to like teach or or podcast or publish about any of these subjects has to come from like trauma or like in some program in our in the 12-step rooms, the motivation for everything comes from desperation? Is that, I think that's true for like a lot of the people who are, when they have something to say or something to a big message to carry?
I'm thinking about the people I've already mentioned. Ben Patrick, the knees over toes guy, he was obsessed with basketball all throughout high school and like blew out his knees.
Mm.
And he went to a surgeon who was like, you have the knees of an 80-year-old. Like you'll never like play basketball again. The best we can do is maybe like do some surgery and you'll be back to 80% of what you were 2 years ago or something.
Mm-hmm.
And he rejected that, and he learned for himself and kind of came to his own conclusions. And similarly, I had a bout of chronic illness in college, some kind of mono like symptoms, Epstein-Barr, that triggered something, and I was unwell for almost a year. And then I discovered the paleo diet, which helped me because I was probably mostly because I was eliminating some of the bigger culprits like processed grains and seed oils. I thought at the time that eliminating sugar had been a big factor, but looking back, I went really hard on that high fat, didn't completely eliminate sugar, so I was kind of right in this bad territory of high fat with still with the sugar. I didn't get the concept of chronometric separation, of separating your carbs and fat in time. But yeah, I mean, I think you have to be a little bit messed up to want to go out of your way to share this message with people. And yeah, so I'm a little screwed up.
Fair enough. Yeah. Another thought that crossed my mind is it hard to you're married? Can your wife be on her toes with all the your diet? Like, you must be hard to cook for.
Yeah, you're striking a nerve here. And if she were here, she would say that, yeah, I mean, it's been a sticking point in our relationship ever since. I remember once we were coming back from like a trip down to Southern California, and her parents had like they had a bag of Cheetos and sent us home back like with this bag of Cheetos, and it was like we're driving back, and she gets out the bag of Cheetos, and I'm just thinking like, you're actually just gonna like eat Cheetos out of the bag, like that's not food. And it was like our first really big fight, or one of our first really big fights, where it was like, shoot, like I don't know if this is gonna work, like if this is, and I recognized on some level that this was a little bit irrational, but at the same time, my wife doesn't eat Cheetos anymore, and I don't think she's any less happy for it. Another thing that she credits me for is when we first met, she was kind of afraid of cooking meat because it would, get the cutting boards dirty and you'd have to do a lot more dishes. So she ate a lot of tofu, and she developed like a lump in her breast, and so she stopped eating tofu. Like the lump went away, and yeah, like this is another thing with if you look into Ray Peat, one of his big points is that the dangers of too much estrogen, getting your estrogen out of balance with like progesterone and some of these other hormones. And tofu contains a lot of estrogen,
Oh wow.
phytoestrogens from soy. Hops in beer are the same way. I used to love beer. I can't drink it anymore. I can't enjoy it because I know that it's like a chemical cocktail of these phytoestrogens. So beer for me is sadly something that's pretty much no more, except on a special occasion. But yeah, it's hard, and she's adapted. We still struggle at times, and like sometimes I just have to go a little bit more out of my way to, especially when we're traveling, to make sure that I'm sourcing things that I like. Otherwise, you're just at the whim of whatever people are putting in front of you, and that's almost always has seed oils in it, and uh, often grains and gluten and glyphosate and lots of yucky stuff.
Yeah, I used to before I read your book, I used to eat. I used to buy those like pre-made salads at the from the grocery store and I'd eat those a fair amount. And I still occasionally get them, but I don't. But it's less because I just feel less pressured to eat my vegetables. And then I felt like I think I might have limited my eggs until. And then read the book and I was like, oh, I'm not going to limit my eggs anymore. I don't know. Maybe I should be limiting my bacon though. If but I don't know.
Possibly,
Hmm.
bacon has a couple things going on. One is because the pigs eat a diet of mostly like GMO soy and corn and things that are kind of higher in these omega 6 like polyunsaturated fats. They tend to be more inflammatory, and pigs also eat like literal garbage, and the plastics in their food like can kind of bioaccumulate in our bodies. So I don't need a ton of bacon. Like yeah, you can have it a couple times a week I think. But if you're trying to be really strict, then maybe stick to stuff like the ruminants, cows, goats, sheep,
Hmm.
that have been raised somehow a little more sustainably
Hmm.
on pasture. There is pasture raised pork. I don't know much about it or where to get it, but that's also an option if you are willing to spend a little bit of extra for that bacon.
The other thing that crossed my mind about you talking about the story about tofu is that I was vegetarian for like 5 years in the late '90s,
Oh yeah.
and uh, and I didn't have health problems with it. But I'm just curious, like, is that like is vegetarianism uh, antithetical to what you've learned, or is there? Do you believe there's
Hey,
like a
you
way
know
to
our
make that
our
work?
friend Constantine makes it work,
Oh yeah,
and he does it by vegan is very hard.
yeah.
I'll say, parents that raise their kids vegan from newborns, like to me, that's very questionable, and I think you have to really think long and hard. And like I'm very conflict avoidant, so I would never say this to a vegan's face, but if you look at like milk production from the mother eating a vegan diet, the milk is not going to be of as good of a quality as if the mom is also consuming good quality fat and dairy. And if you're vegan, the quality fats, I mean, you're limited to like olive oil, coconut oil, avocados. You can get some quality fats, but you're not getting the right nutrients in the right ratios. And humans really have adapted to eating animal products, and Europeans, uh, do very well with dairy and full fat dairy. So I would say you can get by on like Constantine does, eating cheese and yogurt and a variety of
Hmm.
in season produce. He gets his protein mostly from cheese, spirulina, What else? I don't think he eats legumes really. Maybe some nuts, but uh, yeah, it's hard. You don't need as much protein as the bodybuilders tell you, so you can get by as a vegetarian if you eat eggs and milk, certainly.
Got it. Yeah. Um. So, let me ask you about just this thing that we're doing here. This is podcasting. What do you?
Screenaholics. This is yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's our audience. There's a nation of screenaholics. What do you think? What do you think about like? And you've been doing this for a little while. So what's been your experience, and what do you think
yeah,
about it?
I think the podcasting space is shifting a little bit, and um, one really cool and kind of exciting thing is with the advent of these large language models, you have the possibility of using conversations as the language input for generating all kinds of different outputs. So I think there's going to be kind of a gold rush, for like news sources of um, original and up to date uh, ideas expressed in language. And I think that there's going to be a premium on that. And podcasting kind of, came out of radio a little bit, vlogging, blogging. But it's a way, I look at it as like conversational podcasts are a great way to do a brain dump. So I haven't said that many original things in this conversation. And I'd like to in the future explore like how every episode or every iteration of a podcast can bring forth something new into the world. And maybe this is where we're going to start to get more original because I haven't said these exact things. But yeah, I've been doing a deep dive into what some people call prompt engineering. Elon Musk had a great tweet where he said, basically, uh, prompt engineering prompt engineering is natural language programming. So you're giving instructions to the computer in terms that another human being would understand, and it transforms that through the LLM's architecture into whatever you're telling it to do. And it's really cool, and it can do a lot of things better than we can, whether that's editing for grammar, making it more concise, writing in the style of fill in your favorite author, Ernest Hemingway, Michael Pollan. Let's say I want to take a podcast transcript and make it into a blog post or an article. I can run a series of prompts that will give me the output that I want, um, and I'm just lightly guiding it along the way. So if I tell it right off the bat, just like write an article based on this transcript, it's going to be garbage in, garbage out. But if I go one step at a time, this is the thing about LLMs. They can only do one thing at a time. So you got to think with them step by step. And you say, all right, first step is let's just pick out what's the big idea in this piece. And you say, okay, so this is a transcript about, uh, give it some of the topics and keywords and narratives, and then say, like, what's the big idea in here? It'll give you some options. You pick which one you like, and then you say, okay, now write me an outline with five main points in a logical order that flow from this big idea. It gives you the outline. You say, okay, I like this one and this one. Let's rearrange these. Now let's make this give this some more detail. Like look through, make sure that we're catching all the important details, and then also give me a list of the stuff that you're discarding. And so you can see it kind of like how it's thinking. And you say, oh, well, you discarded this, but doesn't that kind of fit in over here? Like, let's bring that back into the outline. And then once you've got your outline, then you can say, okay, now I want you to be so and so, a New Yorker essayist. And let's write, let's craft our opening hook for this section. And yeah, so it's just like you can consider writing as a process. Starts with the brain dump, this rough, unedited transcript. And what you get out on the other end in maybe a period of 30 minutes to an hour is a piece of polished prose that is entirely original because what was said in that conversation has never been said before. Maybe it's two people, a meeting of minds. The ideas have sex and give birth to this new idea. And so it doesn't have the problems that a lot of AI generated content have, which is that you're just giving it a prompt to basically pull from what's already been said on the internet, the data that it's trained on. So yeah, like it can summarize a book, and you can also you can do some novel combinations using just the data that it's trained on. But when you look at what people are doing with the Mid Journey and image creation, it's like very creative stuff. I don't think anyone could say that AI is not creative at this point. Like it does very creative things. It's not just doing repetitive tasks. Humans, I would argue, are actually much better still at doing repetitive tasks than AI. AI is better at being creative. I can follow the same exact steps to generate an article out of a transcript. That's the repetitive part.
So in order to like get ready to in the new economy find a way to serve the machines, like what like but
Yeah, we're still in charge. We're still giving them guidance. Like a
yeah.
prompt is just guidance. And so it's kind of like I love this analogy of cyborg chess. This is where players are allowed to use a computer playing other players. And um, what's interesting, so 1997, Deep Blue beat Gary Kasparov,
Mm-hmm.
and everyone thought like, okay, well, like now it's over. The machines are just gonna take over the world. Well, maybe that's an exaggeration, but instead the sport kind of bifurcated, and still the main event is just human versus human.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also tournaments where people are allowed to play with a computer. And what's funny is like mediocre chess players who have trained a lot with the computer will beat the grandmasters who are also using computers but haven't trained with the computer as much. So it's like this magnifier that rewards people who get good at using the technology. So my big bet for the next 5-10 years, I'm kind of angling in the direction of like a media company that will train my friends and the people who I want to have more influence, who have ideas that I want to see out there, train them to use these tools to be more prolific and create a quantity of quality writing that just blows the Michael Pollins and the people who are maybe a little more skeptical of using AI because they're a little more precious about their writing.
Is there a chance that like the type of content actually will shift? The podcasts are just a brain dump, but is there now an appetite for podcasts instead of that polished writing? Like, is it only my parents the ones reading the polished writing, or do we have a new generation of readers and that's not happening? You think?
No, and it's true. Like the again, like the transformer architecture, it is very good at translating from one language into another, and that includes things like summarizing and condensing. So that's, I mean, it's the same language, but it's transforming the input. And so you can imagine in the future, like let's say I subscribe to a list of different feeds. It's blogs, email lists, whatever, and it knows what I like, and it knows how to summarize and like distill all that in a way that works best for me. So the way we consume content will also change. You can imagine I'm producing a book right now out of a bunch of interview transcripts from the late Ray Peat. And this is information that no one knows where to find or how to, it's kind of jargony and technical. So I'm going to rewrite it for 10th grade level, sweetened condensed Pete. And other people are going to read it, but maybe they'll even read it in a further distilled form. Maybe they'll run it through, their own filtering mechanism. And so I do think that as the cost of compute, the cost of, running these prompts and getting the output goes down, we will see more and more ways that people are kind of consuming content and repurposing content in ways that the author didn't originally write it.
Yeah, the other thing is that AI could just like if there's new types of formats that are popular, AI could create those also, right? Like so if they could, I I guess that Lex Friedman, who's copying in a lot of unconscious ways because I've watched him so much, but I think he has clips on the like he posts out his whole podcast, but he also posts like clips,
Mm-hmm.
and I wonder like to some extent like do does he do the clips, or does he have software that just does that? Like, can software sift through it and find the best
Yeah,
clips?
yeah, it
Like
can.
software could come up with like the software could
The
come up with
best
like
clips. Right. I mean, if you feed a transcript, you can say what are the most like emotionally resonant quotes from this transcript.
create 5 TikTok
Yeah,
videos
yeah.
from this thing.
And that's a great content strategy for podcasting. It could get played out, but the idea of like the podcast is the pillar content and then you have micro content based on that. So in this hour-long conversation, maybe 5 2-minute clips will really stand out from all the noise. But some people might also just enjoy the flow. Like I don't really enjoy listen. I like listening to Joe Rogan. It's kind of a flow. It's like a certain there's a mode of listening. It's passive. You're kind of getting to know the guest. So there will always be a place for that. But but yeah, the distillation and the snippets, I think that's also here to stay.
You said at the beginning, like that there's going to be because of AI, there's going to be an increasing demand because of LLMs. There's going to be increasing demand for text. Did I hear that right? Did you?
Yeah, like as data. Yeah.
Okay.
But it also applies to something like internal company data. So companies right now are kind of rushing to make efficiencies in their standard operating procedures and onboarding new employees by there's kind of a new industry of like an agency that will come into your company, build a chatbot that has all of the knowledge from your wikis and standard processes and will provide a resource so that anyone in the company can access like and ask questions. This comes with other security issues too, though. If you have proprietary code or if you're dealing with a lot of data that's sensitive, but yeah, this will be definitely one of the big frontiers of that the AI technology is opening up, and we're seeing some like I think some kind of cascading changes resulting from this. I'm trying to stay on top of it, and that can sometimes feel like a full-time job. But I would say you don't really need to understand how everything works in order to figure out how you can use it to your benefit. And so I just treat them as like I use Claude, which is a version of an LLM like ChatGPT produced by a company called Anthropic, and it has a large context window. So you can feed it an entire transcript, and it will remember that whole thing, and you can ask it questions about that whole thing. Whereas ChatGPT is limited to something like maybe 8,000 words, which is actually about the length of a transcript. So at this point, ChatGPT's gotten more versatile. But I just say like get in there and like play around with it. I am working on a book. My next book is going to be The Elements of Natural Language Programming, kind of like The Elements of Style by E.B. White. But now that AI can basically handle all the elements of style, good writing, in my opinion, is just going to be a matter of being able to manipulate ideas in a way that produces the most coherent, entertaining, lively prose. And you'd think that a computer wouldn't be better than a human at that, but it's surprisingly good.
It's more efficient anyway. Like
It's more
clearly,
efficient, yeah.
it's certainly like how fast it can read is a huge advantage.
Right. And I'm not going to say that the next, like, I think that with literature, it's sort of a different thing, but so much of, so many books are basically to communicate information and to get a point across. And that's what my writing has mostly been about. I try to do it in like a lively and entertaining way, and also be persuasive and be, yeah, just give a good user experience, right? Uh, but I think all that is compatible with this new mode of writing.
How where does social media fit into this landscape for you? Like, do you see a role for it going forward in all this?
I do, and I think this is how I see social media changing. Um, Twitter is my preferred platform. I think Twitter is going to win out over both, Threads. Threads is going to be short lived, and even Facebook, people use Facebook. Old people use Facebook still. I don't use Facebook anymore. I don't use Instagram either because it's not interactive. It always feels like chasing clout. Whereas Twitter, you can carve out a little niche where one, it's friendship. You're building friendships. Two is exchanging ideas and getting like the latest takes. It's easy to get. I get like hot take fatigue where it feels like, oh, I need to, you know, be balancing all these different perspectives, and someone might say something like, let's say, someone tweets something about like podcasting that's very negative. I might like take a little hit and all these little like micro assaults on our ego. um, we got to balance that with like the real learning and advantages that you can get from social media. um, so like with more and more people using AI tools to try to like game the system and go viral, I don't think that's going to work. But if people like, I've got a whole database of ideas for tweets, um, that contain, I think, like valuable information. And at some point, if I get my content engine revved up, I'll start sharing those, and hopefully it will be a way to simultaneously clarify my own thinking and connect with other people who have similar ideas or can need to hear this message. I don't know. What do you think?
Um, well, it's like I think there's a lot of marketing that probably like I never studied marketing, but I watched Mad Men, and so I'm sort of aware of you know that there's ways of selling that work better than others. Yeah,
Well, okay, another
but
another
I'm skeptical that like I imagine that AI can bring us better ways of marketing, like we can stuff that's like easily measurable like that, like in terms of hits generated. It makes sense that AI would improve. Whereas like the thought crossed my mind that like AI cannot write. You mentioned can AI write better than humans, I think probably not. Ultimately, like the best work is still like human. It comes from the heart, but
I think that's probably well, but they're not incompatible either. Like you can incorporate everything from the heart into your prompt and into the source material.
right. I mean, do you remember? Did you read any Beverly Cleary when you were a kid,
Oh
like
yeah,
Beezus and Ramona? You remember
yeah.
she had that one book, Dear Mr. Henshaw, which is all letters.
Mm-mm.
Uh, or I guess another all letters book would be the one where in C.S. Lewis, where it's a bunch of letters from this demon to a
Right,
fellow
right,
demon.
right.
The something Chronicles, the
Screw
screw
tape
tape letters.
letters.
Yeah. So like maybe that would be a fun idea for a book. Was like the communication back and forth between the human and the AI. We'll probably see some of those. That's a cool concept, and it's a little bit what you're talking about, right? Like there's a back and forth.
Right, right. And I that was another thought that I had for a way to go about this Ray Pete book would be like Ask Pete, dialogues with the deceased Ray Pete, where you try to get it to imitate his voice, you build a chat bot, and then interact with it. Yeah, the possibilities are endless, and I think there is a slight advantage to the people that are early adopters and figure out the principles. Some people think that prompt engineering will kind of get baked in. I don't really know what that means. I guess it's like as people build specific tools, then you won't have to be as good at prompt engineering in order to get the outputs that you want. It'll be kind of pre-programmed for you. But I think that to some extent, like I get much better results the uh, when I use the chat bots than when I use any kind of service that's built on the OpenAI API. Like I'm figuring out in real time what works, what doesn't, and the fact that Claude has this massive context window just makes it such an obvious choice over the other ones. But I can imagine, and this might be a tool that I'll try to develop if I can find the programmers to assist with it. Isaiah and I have talked about doing this because we're working together on the Ray Pete project and trying to build this
Nice.
chatbot that anyone can interact with. But and it'll be free, but we'll sell the book and we'll sell other products. Um, the product that I envision is an author assist, and it would be based on any kind of archive of content. It could be your blog, it could be your, you upload your podcast, and what it would do is first it would, transcribe all the podcasts, kind of tag them, and based on the tags, you would then iterate with it to come up with your outline, and then go sort of chapter by chapter, refining the outline. And it'd be a way to just, for any podcaster to come out with a book or multiple books on their content and give their audience a different way to consume the information. But this does mean that if everyone's doing this, suddenly like the authority of having a book is kind of cheapened. Everyone and their mother, status is sort of a zero-sum game. But information and knowledge sharing is not. So I think that, this is a world where you'll be able to get answers much more easily, and it starts to be a question of like, who do you trust, as opposed to how do I do this? It's like, who's already done what I want to do, and what did they do?
All right. Last question, and thank you so much for your time. And
Oh man,
I could take
my pleasure.
more
We'll
time.
do it again.
Yeah. What do you think is the biggest problem facing, like, like you're a father, you've got a couple of kids. What's the biggest problem that you want to like get our hands on? We've got a lot of new technology, a lot of solutions we're talking about, but what do you think the biggest maybe it could be in health or education or anything, but any big problems?
Seed oils. No, I'm just kidding. Seed oils are a big one, but in terms of number one, I think it has to be the screen addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, screen addiction, and what else? What's more dangerous? I think that the vision of Wall-E still captured it best, of like sitting in the easy chair with the slushie and the screen. But I think it actually gets darker than that, because as social media companies kind of algorithmically pick out the stuff that people like the most. Mr. Beast made a great point. He's the number one YouTuber.
I know of him, yeah.
And he says, like, whenever people talk about the algorithm, they're talking about like what people like, what people watch, what keeps people from clicking away from their video. That's all the algorithm means. It's not like some, granted there are sophisticated pieces of code that underlie like how to capture that. But it basically just boils down to what people like. And so I fear for the younger generations getting all this like weaponized addictive content beamed into their eyeballs, and I'm not immune to it. Like have spent all day today on a screen, with short brief exceptions. I've been on a screen all day. I watched Djokovic play his match against Sinner this morning. That was a great match. Djokovic won in 3 sets. He's on to the Wimbledon finals. But yeah, like
Alcaraz looks tough.
Oh yeah.
Big game on Sunday.
We'll see. It's yeah. I'm gonna be glued to the TV on Sunday as well.
Yeah.
And so as we get better at like serving each other entertainment, especially for me, the stuff that gets me is like it's entertaining and it has value, so I can justify spending more time on it. And I feel like the more information you consume, the more you need to creatively move your body outside in nature in order to be able to assimilate it. And my closing comment, I guess, will be that, along with keeping on top of some of the AI tools to be at the forefront of this new technology, is getting out into the real world so that you have interesting perspectives and stuff to say. So I've got a sticker on my computer that says, finish your work and go outside. And like, I almost always get more value at any given moment. Like, I should probably be outside, but can't do, I don't know. I mean, you gotta find a balance, and I'm on the wrong side of that balance. So my name is Charlie, and I'm a screenaholic.
Clearly going to be an essential guest to this podcast with answers like that. Thanks for coming on. We'll do it again. Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, and I'm gonna recruit you to my my Substack bundle,
which is doesn't exist yet. All right,
but hey, where's your website online?
My website, charliedeist.com.
Okay, and I also have Virgilius, which is virgili.us, like the Latin name of the poet Virgil. And that's my company that does podcast to prose, ghostwriting, books out of podcasts, articles, books, whatever. I
Awesome.
don't do social media.
Okay. Except
That's,
for Twitter, but not professional. Okay, got it. Okay,
yeah,
you're
exactly.
a good Twitter follow. All right, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark.
Pew.